Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Mastering the Drop, a real view of recovery. My name is Trisha Peridot, and I'm the proud owner and creator of Turning Leaves to Recovery Life and Wellness Coaching. And today, well, our guests are running a little behind. Hopefully they will be. Looks like I'm having a little bit of connectivity issues. Let me just give this 1 second. Please bear with me. Usually being in a rural area, it kind of bounces around. Anyway, reset. Our guests for today are running a little bit behind and/or got caught up. So I'm going to go ahead and just get started. Again, this is Mastering the Drop, a real view of recovery. And what we are doing here through these episodes of Mastering the Drop is taking a journey toward, loving and honoring ourselves, making ourselves the priority, taking care of ourselves from the inside out. And this month, we are focusing on levels of addiction, the pressure of comparison, which means we are talking about what addiction and recovery look like, how not all addictions look the same, and why no two stories are the same. So last week, again, we had on Pat and we had Rebecca, and we were really talking about treatment options. And this week, our topic is talking about how those different severity levels come into play, and then just really knowing how to search and seek the options and to know how to choose what's best going to fit you for the optimum results, and then how to incorporate them upon your completion, because that can be super tricky. And it's even more confusing when we have moderate to low severity, because treatment needs are different there. And so oftentimes we don't know where to go, who to see, or even where to start. So anyway, I do apologize that you're stuck with just me today. However, that's okay, because we can still get to the bottom of this, right? And so, okay, so here's the deal. What are the treatment modalities? So let's talk about that. So, well, actually, I want to back up. Levels of severity, right? So we have that low, moderate level of severity where you have the individual, the adult that is highly functioning. Oh, look, Mr. Pat came in. Let's let him come in first and say hello. Hey, he's here. You're muted.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Thank you so much for coming back. I did get started. I knew that Rebecca was running a little behind, and I just figured that you did also. So it's just doing a little bit of a recap on last week. And then the levels of severity, right? So those low level, highly functioning individuals that are stuck, and then, going up through to that complete physical dependence, not functioning in life, that realm. And so, yeah. How
awesome.
Are you doing good today?
I'm doing good today. I'm out in the field. Seems to be one after the other kind of crisis, and finding the right placement for those that are struggling with addiction.
Well, okay, so that's what we're talking about today, right? And so I know how I determine whether somebody needs, short-term residential or, long-term, placement, right? Because people also don't realize that there are options out there that are those long periods of time, those programs that are 12 months that you go and you completely just go live someplace else for a while. And then the sober living, which is usually more like a 90-day period, isn't it? Or 6 months, just depending, right? But how do you generally determine where you want to place them?
Me personally, it's about getting to know that person. It's about hearing the story. Where when I get a call, usually, well, every time I get a call, someone wants to tell me their story. They want to tell me where they're at, what's going on, what they're, the struggles with X, X, Y, and Z. I had 2 cases this morning, polar opposite, right? The first one I called, high functioning 40-year-old male, works 60 hours a week, has a family, has kids, can't stop drinking, right? But he binge drinks. So he'll go 3 days and then he'll go 7 days off. Then he'll go 3 days, but it's the 3 days that are hurting him, right? And so, does he need, right, pretty dangerous, but what level is it hurting him? Right. And so, for him, his wife was affected. His kids are affected. He's okay physically. He doesn't get the shakes. He doesn't, have the DTs. He doesn't hallucinate. Right. So does he need a detox? Right. So he didn't feel he needed a detox. I said, well, why don't we do a 3 to 5 day detox and let's see what happens. And he, at that point, dug his heels in. He said, I can't leave work. Detox isn't the right option for me. And he works full time. So would a PHP program be beneficial for him in that moment? No, right? So I see you shaking your head. It wouldn't, right? An IOP 3 days a week at night would be the level of care possibly, right? And so it starts at that level of care, and then we kind of go to the once a week therapist, to a coach, and so just kind of depending. He was willing to have a coach talk to him, to guide him in a process, to guide him to his internal process and what's going on for him, to help him see the benefits of, the different levels of care. Right. And so that's where he's at.
So I think, I find that this is a really good way to talk about this, because we've got a highly functioning individual with a binge use issue and not wanting to do any kind of, standard protocol detox. I'm not leaving I'm not leaving work. And so we go to, hey, you know what? Intensive outpatient. These are generally 3 nights a week. It's a group setting, and you meet with a counselor once a week. This is an effective option. I mean, we've seen great results with this. Or it wouldn't be a standard of care, right? But let's talk about how this could go. So if somebody that's listening, like, okay, cool, like that shows me that there's a treatment option for somebody who wants to, continue going to work and, this, that, or the other thing, right? And I think Amy's having trouble staying in the room. So, but what about the professional that's like, you know what? I don't want to have to go somewhere after work, right? Like, I just want to go do weekly therapy. So, and then you talked about them having some willingness for coaching. And so what I generally do, and this is me, and this is in my practice, is I prefer to take, say, that person into coaching. I usually will recommend that over the IOP, right? And not to build my own business, but to afford for the way that I do it, which is that, the daily little doses of things that we give them to work on in their life, and different accountabilities that is daily. Whereas in the group setting, it's super easy for somebody who's ambivalent, right? Who's only doing it for their spouse or, their family, because we really need the person to buy in and think, I got to do this for me. Maybe nothing's physically wrong yet, but that doesn't mean it won't be, right? But, then this way we get them engaging at a higher level almost, instead of ambivalent, just sitting in a chair in a room full of people, not really chiming in, perhaps being bitter, and not really taking the message. So we have to know the personality of the person. Will they engage in the IOP? Like, are they like, oh, that sounds rad, I like it, sign me up? Or are they like, sure, whatever, I'll do it? We have to be able to, discern that, which is, something I think is a great conversation to have. Like, if there's somebody listening, what kinds of pieces inside of those programs? So IOP, right? If we talk about their standard treatment models, it's, as far as what do they present in these groups? Like, how person-centered is it? What do you think? You're muted.
I'm sorry. I don't know why it did that. I tend to look for outpatient models that are client centered, more with more therapy, more individual care. I mean, individualized care is kind of the key term that programs use. So I personally go into programs and see what it is that they're doing. Because the standardized treatment and doing the same relapse prevention group every week, in my opinion, isn't necessarily effective. What the caseload or what the milieu of that outpatient has this week and what the struggles are this week are going to be different the following week. So treatment centers that I tend to lean towards are willing to change groups depending upon what the milieu is struggling with, which is really truly individualized.
So when we use certain terms, and I just want to make sure people understand, what we're referring to is the population. So as the population shifts,
correct,
phase in and phase out, they kind of take a read. They maybe add, edit, delete their standard protocols when they admit people. So, but I want to keep this super relatable. So standard care, you brought up, same weekly relapse prevention group. And so what is a relapse prevention group? We're talking, what we're referring to is a group where you sit down and you talk about triggers, you talk about things that prompt you, you talk about cravings, you talk about the environment, the people, the places, the things. But does that sound about accurate?
Sounds accurate, yeah. And then
right.
It's
no idea, right? So
well, then it's solution oriented, right? As okay, we talk about the triggers, then what's going to be the plan when these triggers happen? So then they gain skills to be able to deal with it. I mean, the more structure, right? The more structure provided, typically, the better for someone who's fresh off a run. Now, somebody with, right? So I always start with detox and then go down based upon their willingness, so to speak. Because we have to meet someone where, in my opinion, we have to meet someone where they're at. I can coach, I coach, you coach, and sometimes people go, well, that's not a good business model. You should probably just coach them from the beginning and then work them into treatment. But sometimes, like the second case that I got, right, it's kind of like the way I look at what I do a lot is like it's triage. Someone comes in and it's like, okay, what are the main problems? And so the kid I had today had just overdosed on heroin and fentanyl. He's been using heroin daily for 7.5 years, and detox was a primary. Without him getting off of the opiate, no matter how much coaching I do, he's still going to be using the heroin on a daily basis, which means there's not much. And so we got him into a detox situation.
See, and so for people that are listening, right? Because people that show up on my door, the main discernment I have to make is their impulse control, right? Like they're coming to me with a desire to, do this coaching practice, this model, this way that I present recovery as a lifestyle, because the different population that I serve, right, being those more highly functioning, et cetera, right? But I do get those calls like, hey, I'm daily, with daily drinkers. And so sometimes we sit in the coaching and sometimes we are successful, and other times it's like, okay, because we come to an agreement at the beginning, right? Like, if after, if we are unable to do it by you being, in this coaching model, because I can interact with my clients every single day, that, that's fine. But if they're still going to continuously be, drinking in the middle of the night, or, and they just can't make themselves not do it, then yes, then okay, coaching put on hold. Let's go get some stabilization, whether that means detox, partial hospitalization, or a 30-day stay somewhere. We have to be able to discern that. But, kind of making that agreement up front. And for people that don't have, that aren't living a life where it's heroin, meth, handle of vodka every day. Like, if we're not at that severity that like Pat's referring to, right? We might be talking to, and I'm going to bring Amy in here in 1 second, because we might be talking about somebody who has, like a really strong addiction to food, and it is causing health problems, right? They're not going to be able to go to the standard, treatment protocols for what we're talking about, right? The intensive outpatient. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. There are eating disorder clinics. There are those kinds of things. So again, even with your relationship with food, we still need to be able to discern, is coaching going to be the most effective for you, because you can work at home on opening your own refrigerator and creating those distractors or alternate behaviors and processes, or do we need to go get some stabilization in a 30-day place? But then if we throw in trauma, right? So now, Pat, we're gonna, if we throw in trauma, you've got a heroin user who has high levels of trauma, right? Amy's gonna be like that trauma therapist that's gonna say, hold on, wait a minute, right? We need more than just detoxification, right? Like, so Amy, let's, if you want to chime in here, we're talking about, helping people, well, from a clinical viewpoint, and I'm trying to normalize it as we bring things up, because I know a lot of the listeners are everyday people. They're not us who are, the clinicians that are saying, hey, you need to go here. I want people to be able to go, I like, and we'll get around to the, the massage or the equine therapy, or, some of these other things now that we've brought the modalities in. But Amy, how do you, how, as a trauma therapist, what do you see?
My personal opinion is that they do need some intense type of treatment. That's not always found on the outside. Sometimes their environment re-traumatizes them over and over on the daily. So we have to remove them from that environment, start teaching them, showing them healthy ways of living, which could be completely lost in translation for them if they remain in that environment. So sometimes in taking them out of that environment and teaching them something new, then you also then have to look at finding them that quintessential, for lack of better terms, sober living, because you might have to remove them from the city and the town that they're in, or they're going to keep repeating the same behaviors because they have the same connections. And when you're jonesing hard for something, it's so easy to get into that habit. We are told, and I have found that it is so true, we become like the 6 people that we are hanging around with. We become them. So if you are hanging around girlfriends, you've got 3 girlfriends that are going through a divorce, guess what? You're going to start to develop some marital problems just because your friends are. When you hang around that, you become it. If you hang around someone that is living healthy, eating clean, exercising, practicing wellness, mindfulness, then you become that. And so we need to get them in that type of environment. And sometimes, unfortunately, it's removing them from where they are.
So just to tie the two of you together, because Pat was talking about this last week, right? Because him and I were talking, the three of us were talking about how do you know when it's best to choose a sober living environment, farther away from home, right? Or how do you know when they need to go to a sober living environment? But so,
and if I may, you're not going to know unless the family's involved, unless there's significant others involved. You're not going to know that answer. If you only work with the client, you're not going to never know.
It's true. 100%.
So you have to include those outside people. It would be so great if these treatment facilities, their BD reps could actually go out, and like bringing BD reps into it is like a beautiful thing, because oftentimes they know the family. Oftentimes they see what the house is. They know the living conditions. They know the people they're hanging out with. They know the jobs they have. Like, you have to have that connection. That's how you know where you're going to place them, what's going to work for them. And most importantly, like, don't be afraid to ask the client. The client knows themselves better than anybody else. I don't care how many experts you bring in. I don't care how many degrees I have. That client still knows himself better than I know him.
I can back that up 100%, because I've been either the client or I've been the clinician, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm gonna let Rebecca in. So, but Pat, so when you're relocating people, right? Because we're talking now, we're bringing in an even higher level of severity. We're talking adding in trauma and a need to remove somebody from their environment, right? How often do you find that those longer term care programs offer that level of mental health support for trauma? So the
Well,
trauma,
I think, yeah, I mean, my experience with the high level of trauma is we need to place them in a primary mental health facility in order to stabilize the trauma before we do the aftercare program. And so, without the stabilization, what I see a lot of times is programs that are not equipped to take mental health, to deal with the trauma, deal with the addiction, bring them in, and the addiction's taken care of, but the mental health isn't. And then they send them to an outpatient sober living, and right. And so if the trauma is not taken care of, then they're replaying their trauma at the sober living home with their other clients. Then they're placing themselves in another situation to be re-traumatized, and then they're back getting loaded, the addiction's out the door, and then they're going back to treatment. So I think from where I stand is about understanding the mental health side, to understand the addiction side, and to really look at it's like I said before, it's like a triage, right? Like, what needs to be taken care of first. If the mental health isn't stabilized, the addiction's never going to be. We're going to keep going back and back and back and back. And so we're starting to see a lot more treatment centers being primary mental health. Now, if they are, that's another whole other conversation we can have.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, aren't we also seeing that insurance is covering mental health more than they are addiction treatment?
Yeah, they're starting to pay more
Almost
for
like
mental
we're
health.
motivated to get them stabilized and then transition them into mental health, which
Yes.
So behind every addiction, I won't say every, it's 97.8% of the time, you have mental health, you have trauma, or you have both. Until you address those, that vicious cycle of relapse is going to continue to occur. The sooner we get to the core of what created the issue, and it could be any addiction. It could be an addiction to books. It can be an addiction to food. It can be addiction to gambling, to porn, to video gaming. Until you get behind and underneath what's prompting that addictive behavior, because it's the same behavior. The substance might be different, but it's the same behavior. And that's what you have to grapple with. That's what you have to work with. That's what you have to get underneath. If you can't do that, you're going to have relapse. the same
So-
behavior will continue to occur.
To definitely clarify that, absolutely. We all have conditioned ways of being, and we reach for the popsicle for a reason, right? We were conditioned as children. You fall down, you scrape your knee, you put a popsicle in your mouth, right? You get a good grade, and you go celebrate at the ice cream, whatever. Back in my days, it was Farrell's ice cream. Anyway, and where if you graduate, right? You're a graduate, whatever, big things happen. You go out, you overindulge in food and alcohol and whatever, and it's all the celebration. So we're conditioned to do some sort of, hand to mouth or shopping or whatever. It's an external rewarding system. And again, I'm trying to rephrase things for the people that don't understand our clinician speak, right? So yes, we've all conditioned ourselves to be however we are, and we did it kind of unconsciously because it started in childhood. And so those traumas also may have started to happen in childhood. And even people who think, oh, nothing traumatic happened to me, there were things that happened and your brain stored it in that trauma bank. And it gets stored differently in our brains. We're not going to go into that whole scientific stuff, but everybody's experienced some form of trauma that has some sort of information that's feeding our deep-seated need to have a habitual lifestyle that leads us to relying on something outside of ourselves to bring us peace, joy, comfort, relief, whatever.
Right. And you hit it right there. That's just it. We're feeding the emotion because we don't want to deal with the emotion. We don't know what to do with the emotion. So we're going to feed it. And it can either be a negative feed or a positive feed, but you're going to feed that emotion. If you are not equipped to deal with them, that's when you develop the negative pattern of behavior.
Absolutely. 100%. So, Miss Rebecca, welcome. Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
I so much appreciate you coming back because, and it's actually perfect timing because we've talked about levels of severity, as a recap. We've touched on like placement and some of that. And we've brought in the need for, co-occurring, right? Co-occurring issues. So the trauma, different types of behaviors, etc. But really what I want people to hear about, and I think that you're going to be perfect to get our ball rolling, is sure, we're talking about how we place people, right? Because we're the ones that, are picking these things. But for those people that are listening, that are sitting there at home going, okay, cool, but I don't understand I don't know how to place myself. So when we're talking about cognitive behavioral therapy, all the different things, right? Like, so we want to talk about what should people be looking for if they're out there searching for themselves? So because Rebecca, you're out there making connections and shaking people's hands and taking them and saying, look at these 3 programs because I think they're going to match your personal needs. Or Pat, tell them to look at these 3 places because Pat shared, whatever it is, right? Like you're out there doing outreach and really vetting these programs. But so for somebody who says, hey, I want to do outdoor adventure because I've been isolating myself forever, is that something that they can like actually go and seek and think that it's going to be realistic?
Yeah, I think that, ultimately it comes down to what Pat and Amy have both said and what you've said. I've been listening offline, but it really comes down to, a case. And when someone ultimately contacts me, I look at every case kind of like a pyramid, right? Like here they are, at the top, but what was the foundation that actually, what's the foundation of that addiction? What's down here? What's causing them to want to get high up here, right? So when I break that down, if they do say things to me, like, and when you bring that up, that makes me think of a lot of people that are paramedics or who are, in veteran services. I think that traditional programs don't oftentimes work for them because, they're used to super high stress situations. But then on the other perspective of that, let's talk about doctors. Let's talk about nurses. I mean, look what they've had to deal with, and look what, I mean, there is addiction in profession. Addiction isn't just like someone who may be at the bottom of it, who is on the street and homeless. And I mean, addiction touches everyone, right? Unlike us, there's a line that separates us from states, and there's a line that separates us. There's no line anywhere that separates addiction. So I think that, yes, to answer that, there are places that we can all suggest, and that I definitely do suggest for people that are asking for that. But before I do that, there's a big case that you have to look at. There's a lot of questions that you have to go through. And at the same time, when I'm doing that, I'm also reaching out to one of the other professionals that I know. I'm giving my attention to that individual to come up with their individualized care, but I'm reaching out to people that I know that work at those programs, and I'm saying, hey, this is, and I may not be doing it at the same time. I may say, hey, if it is a situation where I can give a call back, because there are a lot of situations where you can't. You have to do that, everything has to be done right then, because you have a very short time, to talk to someone who's in that position where they're asking for help. But if I do, then I reach out to professionals that work at those programs, or have produced those programs, or have been at those programs, or founders. And I say, this is who I have on the other line. This is where they're from. This is their family dynamic. This is their marital dynamic. This is their addiction. This is what they're telling me. And I have to be honest with you. A lot of times, I do have to say, this is their insurance, or this is their state insurance, or this is their economic status. We have to always remember that there is an economic status. Someday maybe that'll be different, but right now it is what it is. And every state is different where that's concerned. But it takes a lot of time to get in these positions where those professionals that you can reach out to that have all those answers. So it's a skill set to be in outreach. It's a skill set to be in business development. It's a skill set to work for sober living, and to be a therapist, and to be a recovery coach and a lifestyle coach. But we all have to do it together. It takes this team right here to really get that person to the place they need to be at. And if you're like myself and you're independent, I reach out to many different places. But if you're working for a place and you are outreach, essentially, ethically, you're going to look at your own program first. You're going to see if your own program is best suited for that person. But if it's not, also ethically, you want to refer that person on. So you just have to really listen to what's going on with that person.
I love that you said that. When I was looking for a treatment program for myself, I took 2 months vetting the actual program, and I don't know, I probably bugged them to death, but I didn't care. Like, I wanted to talk to the different counselors. I wanted to talk to the nutritionist. I wanted to, all the things, that I developed a report. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this, this, and this before I come, right? Up to and including taking a trip to Missouri, right? Like, I'm doing this, this, and this before I come. I'm coming on this date. And it was like, a couple months, right? And then when I showed up for detox, because it was standard protocol, I was sober. And they're like, you're weird. And I'm like, it's okay, right? Like, this is my journey. Like, I'm planning it out. And so everybody, you get to make your own walk, right? You get to create your own journey. Like, just like when I came out, social supports weren't for me. I went to school. I socialized there. And so I think it's really important that we look at these things. And you guys can, add, edit, delete. But when we're talking about, it's like, have people call me and they're like, what do you think of this treatment program? I really like it because, it's all about, mindfulness-based practices. And they do all these outings, and, you get hot stone massages and all this stuff. Yes, mindfulness-based practices 100% have been proven to have efficacy. Yoga is good for those that it's good for, right? Sometimes we're not ready for it in treatment. And I'm going to caution you, like, I don't give medical advice, but let me tell y'all, if you're going somewhere and they're putting you in a yoga class and they have not checked, they haven't given you medical clearance. Okay, like we need to be doing medical clearance before these things are happening. And I'm talking based on my own experience because I'm not giving medical advice. But look, I was not medically cleared for probably after, I think it was at least 6 months sober before I was medically cleared to do any type of rigorous activity, right? So everybody is unique. So it might be a nice thought to go and do some of these things. Like I wouldn't have been cleared to go on a big rigorous hike either. I would have loved to do those things, but it wasn't in the cards for me. So I got to put it into my into my life balance desires going forward, right? Which is what we look at is, how do we want to build our full life balance, all 8 categories? How am I going to hit those esteem building activities for recreation, social development, family, work, life planning, spirituality, all these things, and whole health, right? Which is 6 categories. So we can't expect to meet all of those things necessarily in treatment. We may have to compromise because our physical body may not be ready to do some of these things that we want to do. And we may need to, like Amy was saying, like Pat was saying, we may need to leave our environment so that we can condition ourselves to have distress tolerance tactics to be able to face some things in our environment that were not serving us, that we were hearing through the wrong filter, seeing through the wrong lens, unable to process appropriately or correctly for whatever reason. And everybody's reason is different. So sometimes we have to be super patient in recovery also. We can't expect to go in, have a 30-year addiction to something and go away for 30 days and come back fine. Like 30 days isn't undoing anything that's been around for any significant period of time. So I just want us all to have like a realistic outlook. Like if all your life, like you've been like really attached to sugar, like this is going to be a struggle. Sugar is a hard one. It is probably a worse detox than alcohol in some cases, right? Like physically feeling. But
yeah, and I think that at a lot of those places you were mentioning nutrition, a lot of the places that people go, there isn't a wonderful plan for nutrition. I mean, there may be a nutritionist that works there, but in a lot of cases, the secondary and dual diagnosis come after you get in for the initial addiction of, an opioid addiction, but then you realize and you start talking about you're addicted to food and you're addicted to, all these other things. And, those have to be things that you're realistic about, but that comes back to the saying that it takes about 10% for all of us out here, but you're going to do 90% of the work when you get in there. And hopefully by the time you get out, you're ready for the 100. Like that's the staple to live by.
That's where that patience comes in also, because if your insurance isn't going to cover, the all-encompassing treatment program, but you need that 30 days of stabilization, you need a 60, 90 day, sober living, right? You need those things, but, depending upon what that looks like for you from a socioeconomic standpoint, like you might have to go, because if it's nonprofit place, right? Like the dietary practices in these different organizations, I know because I worked for one, like it was common stance to have this bucket of red punch in the cafeteria that people were just drinking up all day long. I was mortified from a professional standpoint, but you know what? Like you service providers, we do what we can with what we have. And if all the food is donated, right, like the chefs are going to put together the best that they can. So sometimes we have to be patient and we really have to be willing to do multi-levels. It's what we call the assertive continuum of care. And so we all have our place. Yes, Amy.
When we're talking about those things, I want to piggyback off of something that you had spoke to earlier. Yes, you have to be medically cleared, physically fit to do these activities. We also have to be cognizant of the fact that mentally they're going to need cleared to do things as well. I am not going to start, I'm not going to inpatient treatment when I have this client for 30 days. I'm not going to start such an intense therapy like EMDR, knowing that I'm going to stop. I have to stop. I don't have a choice. I don't get to see them again. And then whenever I send them on, do they have somebody qualified to continue their therapy that I'm providing? Do I want to open up that can of worms? Do I want to revisit that trauma, re-traumatize them just to drop them off and cut them off cold? I guarantee you they're going to relapse again if I do that. So you have to be, like you said, got to be patient. You got to clear them mentally to do the work. You have to work with them mentally to do the work. And then you have to be patient, because I can't give you everything you need in 30 days. I need to call Rebecca. I need to call Pat. I need to call you. I need to, hey, this is what we're doing. Here's where they are in treatment. What do you have for me? Where else can they go? Who is going to be able to pick up this treatment and carry it out? Like, we have to be cognizant of that. We have to pay attention to it, especially when you're talking about insurances. Unfortunately, it is one of those things that Rebecca brought up. We have to be aware of it, because your insurance may not provide for a service that I can start for you. Therefore, you won't be able to finish it. And I do more damage by doing that.
And that's in a lot of different things, right? Like, so with this trauma, I love that. And then I saw Pat's going like this. Yes, please don't start EMDR that you can't finish with my clients, because blah, it's going to be a mess amount. But it's the same respect as, you know, if we go into a place and we've got a private chef, like, that's a nicety. Don't make that part of your treatment, you know, idealistic, right? Because, you know, maybe you aren't going to be able to afford hot stone massages when you come home, and then it's going to be you're missing and going, wow, I really like that. I wish I could incorporate that into my life. Now you're looking at your life and from a negative standpoint, like, oh, I can't have those things. So you want to be able to incorporate things in a lifelong, manageable, and maintainable way. So Pat, what do you see as far as, because I'm seeing you nod your head, right? Like that continuum of care. And you and I are both coaches, and we work with people at all different levels on the spectrum. But what do you see with programs that bring people in and send them out?
Well, I see, like, I mean, insurance used to pay, good for residential treatment. It doesn't, what we're seeing right now is they're getting 14 days of residential, right? So it's really, residential treatment is a stabilization, right? It's the emergency room, it's the triage, it's figuring out what it is and where they need to go. And the treatment centers that I work with, the clinicians have a good grasp on outpatient programs to send their client to, right? There's some treatment centers that'll lean on their PD rep because they have relationships with these other treatments. But the business development is on the business side. It's important that the clinicians have relationships with those outpatient people so that they can say, hey, this is my client. This is because they know their client, where their client is, like Amy was saying, what treatment modalities need to be done for this person, and to be able to communicate with those clinicians, this is who I got, this is what I got, and to send them down, because that's where the real long-term treatment's going to work, right? Is at that outpatient level, which, is so valuable. What we're seeing is in the industry is that the residential days are dropping and insurance is paying for outpatient services. And that's kind of the shift of how at least I'm seeing it. But it's, the real work, I don't want to say the real work, because I value what residential treatment does. So I shouldn't say the real work, but a lot of the in-depth work happens at the outpatient level.
Right. And Rebecca and I have this conversation a lot, right? Is because, yes, we value the residential, we value the detox, the partial hospitalization, right? Even the intensive outpatient, right? Like, all levels of care have a strong purpose and they're super valuable. I've worked in every level of care. But one of the things that Rebecca and I talk about all the time, especially in residential, because insurance is cutting people off, and putting them down into intensive out, is that exit plan. That treatment transition to life plan. Like, if you are only going to have client, and Amy, I'm sure will nod her head at this, if we're only going to have a client for 21 to 28 days, we've got to start our exit planning, connecting the dots, where they, where do we think we need to, because now it's like really hard. Now maybe we're 7 days in and we're already projecting where we think they need to go.
Right, we have to look at it like that. When
Can't
we
wait
get started, no, you have to start that discharge planning right at the beginning when they come in that door, because their first 7 to 10 days, they're detoxing. They feel like garbage. They're not going to sit in therapy and have a one-on-one session with me. They're not able to. They feel like crap. They don't want to get out of bed. And then I have them for 2 more weeks. And I'm going to open up this huge can of worms. I'm going to do a little Freud on them, right? And I'm going to get to what that underlying issue is. And then I'm going to say, okay, you can go now. And
Yeah,
like, I can't.
That's what I love about being a coach, right? Is that I get to work with the family from that first call. That first call I get is I get to coach that family or case management, whatever you want to call it. But I get to coach that family through the process of treatment. I get to say, hey, this residential program with Amy, it's awesome. You're gonna get good quality, stabilization. And I think that this program, this outpatient program is going to be the best fit because we know that client, right? We know the family. We know that what that outpatient is going to be able to do for them, right? And we get to work with the family when the identified patient is in outpatient, and we get to work with the family closer. What really drives me crazy with adult treatment is the lack of family therapy and the lack of family work, because the identified patient, which is little Johnny at the outpatient, the real work is with the family, right? Because of all the enabling and the codependency, but as coaches, we get to work with the family. So that's what I love about being a coach, is we get to guide the whole process, which is, rather than just being the representative, the BD that sends them to one program and they get lost in the chain of going down the line.
Here's
I think
the point
it's important that you
agree
brought
on.
that up, because really quick, I think that's important, Pat, that you brought that up, and thank you for that, because I also, when I have somebody come in and we're going to send them out to, residential, I will work with the spouse or the parents or, whoever is in their nucleus, in their sphere of influence while they're gone, so that when they do come out, like we're doing that. But most people don't realize how effective that truly is, how critical and crucial it is that we okay, because the clients are coming home, the addicts are coming home, or the mental health needs that they're coming home from. When they come home, they're speaking a different language. They're really trying to recondition attitudes, behaviors, processes, urges, impulses, knee-jerk reactivity. They're going to be coming back super new, but it's going to be really vulnerable. It's not going to be set in stone yet. So at least we get to introduce them to the recovery world speak. We get to give them tips and tools and tactics so that they don't become like this people-pleasing codependent with their addict, just so that they can all walk on eggshells and be super hyper concerned that prompt a relapse. We get to also educate everybody about post-acute withdrawal. And I know I beat this in the ground, I talk about it all the time, but it's one of my pet peeves is that, people come out of treatment, they come to work with me and they've never heard of it. What is that? What is that? Why?
So to piggyback off of what Pat was talking about, which I think is vital for the people that are listening to hear, is we're expecting that client to change in treatment. But then we don't expect that from the family. You have to work with that family. Pat is absolutely right, because that family is going to have to change too. They're going to have to change in their response and the manner in which they talk with them and the manner in which they work with them. If they want that client to continue to do well, they're going to have to make changes too. They can't be the yes ma'am. They can't be yes, I'll do it. They have to be able to allow the client to learn and develop and do things on their own to break that dependency. We have to do that with families.
We have to do it with the employers too. And that's what I love about the outreach position that I'm in. And because I've been conditioned and trained by all of you also, and all of the great people that I've worked with in the treatment setting. I really, whenever I do, refer that person in, I don't stop there. I still stay in, communication with all of you, but I stay in communication with the family, with the employer, with the union representative, with the liaison, with the wife, with the children, because in a lot of these situations, the children become the parents, right? I mean, we're talking about a demographic that stems from 18 to 80, or, you know what I mean? Like, just to give it a little bit of a demographic. I mean, we're not talking about adolescent treatment right now, but if we were, it'd be the same scenario. But I just want to bring up something really quick, just to make this super tangible to our audience. I just went to a lead. I was invited to, this is the very first lead I've ever been invited to. I was so honored, that someone once hated me, thrashed around at the, at the mitts when I met them, to get them into treatment was like, fish out of water. They didn't want to go in. They have done so well up until this point. And then I met with another person, because, when you go to those things, you ultimately see a domino effect of people, right? That you've seen, especially if you've been in recovery yourself. And I saw a young lady there, and, there was a situation where, she has a dental appointment coming up. And so that was the first question she asked me. She was very concerned about this dental appointment that she had coming up. This is something that we have to get people to understand. And this is what we're talking about, getting the family and everybody on the same, course. A dental appointment to someone else is just trivial. It's like, it's maintenance, right? It's no big deal. A dental appointment to me means I have to be right in my mind, body, heart, and soul, that I'm going to be able to deal with that pain. I'm going to be honest with my provider, and that I'm not going to relapse because of everything that I'm addicted to. That is a huge thing. And if someone comes out of our programs, they should be going into more programs that teach them how to deal with all of these factors. And that's what rounds this whole conversation back to what everybody is saying. I mean, all of us are saying, that's just a scenario, but I think that makes it super tangible for our audience to see. If you don't work in this field, but if you are listening because you're family, because you're an employer, because you're in treatment, I mean, anybody that's listening can kind of relate to that dental appointment. It can be a nightmare for someone who was once in my shoes.
Just somebody that struggles with anxiety. Like, for me personally, it has nothing to do even with my addiction, but no longer utilizing medication for anxiety, right? Like, for me,
that's a great point.
Like, not in my face, because a lot of my trauma was, spatial in nature. And I'm like, nah, you can't be hanging out up in my grill for for a significant period of time. And so it could be as low severity issue as anxiety to the pain and not being able to utilize medication. And right. But I use the grocery store as a thing as well, right? Because how hard is it for people to go to the grocery store and know what to buy, or not go down the alcohol aisle, or right? And there are ways to navigate everything, but you just got to figure them out, and it takes time. Right.
I love the grocery store analogy, because in tying that in with the anxiety piece, like, you're going to have social anxiety. You're going out as a sober person. It's new.
Everybody
it's
knows.
different.
Like, you think everybody can see it on your face. Like,
like, you haven't gone there before. Yeah, you haven't done this activity sober, and now you're going to be around people. Oh, and how are you going to deal with those people? It's all of that together. It's new. It's different, and it would be great. It is great. It's not would be great. I've been part of that. And to see that change in people, to be a part of that is so rewarding. It's why I do what I do. they're the reward for me. Their success
I
is
mean,
rewarding to me.
we're sitting here. I mean, I don't know who else wants to say, but I mean, like, that's it. Like, there's some of us sitting here that are a success story, and we're working together, because of that. And I really feel like that we need to, one, give a shout out to the professionals, all of us and all of them that we are in contact with, because I think sometimes, treatment does get a bad rap. It gets a bad name just because, you hear more bad stories in the press and the media and this and that, then you're going to hear good stories, but it does take all of those professionals to know these things to, really make a really well-rounded treatment plan. And also, I mean, I'm just going to say it, it takes, I mean, it's not for everybody, but AA and NA, there's a lot of people that that's going to make a difference too, the meetings,
Mhm. And I like the word you used, if that's going to make a difference. I think that's key, because for some people it doesn't.
Yeah.
And that has to be okay. That goes back to what Pat was saying by meeting that client where they're at. That has to be okay. If we're going to work with them, we have to understand that it's going to be okay. That our way is not the only way. The client has to have its own way or find their own way.
100%. So really long-winded way, or not long-winded, very full conversation way for us to all bring to the table for you guys here today, that you have the autonomy to choose. We'd like to, we like to say that we're very good guides, right, as to what appropriate treatment is all about, because it can be confusing. You also may not be in the mind state or of a clear mind, and you might be looking at it going, there's too many options, I can't choose. Whatever the issue is, like, find somebody that speaks your language. Find somebody that you can understand. Find somebody that you feel comfortable talking, whether you're going to use them as a provider or not. Like, I'm fine if somebody calls me and says, hey, can you help me find, resident, long-term, whatever. I don't offer those things, but 100%, I'm trained and educated in doing exactly what Rebecca does, and if I don't know, I'm going to call Rebecca. Or if I think you're a great fit for a Pat, I'm going to, this is not about competition. This is about collaboration, purposeful, productive, proactive people coming together and saying, you have so many options. Yes, ultimately you get to choose, but we're here to help make that easier for you. Regardless of what the outcome, looks like as far as that goes, right? Because I know Pat has people where, he's not affiliated. I do the same. Rebecca does the same. Amy, I'm sure, does the same. So we just want you to see real people in the industry, do real work, that have walked the journey that you're in, regardless of what level of severity. Because I say all the time, I've visited every level of severity. I've visited it for at least a minute, right? At least a season. I've been at every level, and from shopping to eating disorders and food addiction, chemical dependency, from trauma to control issues and people codependency. I've walked it. I know that the rest of you have in whatever degree. I'm not going to tell your story for you. And so we want to be here for you every week. And I can't speak to everybody. I'm sure not everybody's here every week, but hopefully the three of you guys would be willing to come back at some point. Yay. And hopefully people will start sending in questions, sending direct messages. I know we had quite a bit of activity last week, so that was really amazing. So at some point in time today, I'm going to drop all four of our contact information into the chat. I will also put it on the YouTube. So if any of you guys want to get in touch with us, I just have a busy afternoon, but I will drop everybody's information into the comment section at some point. So anyway, thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you for having
me.
Thank you.
Appreciate being here. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.